In this video, we'll explore a notable incident that unfolded in Florida, USA. On July 14, 2012, Adrienne Robert, a 29-year-old, was discovered lifeless by her roommate. Her eyes were open, yet she showed no signs of breathing. The investigation into this case heavily relied on the assistance of CCTV cameras, pivotal in aiding detectives to identify, locate, and apprehend the perpetrator. Adrian came into the world on January 4, 1983, in Brunswick, Maine. She completed her education at Leavitt High School in Maine in 2001 and later earned her degree from the University of Maine at Augusta in 2005. In 2007, she relocated from Maine to Clearwater, Florida. Adrian's loved ones characterized her as a person of beauty and kindness, always radiating happiness and vibrancy. She eagerly anticipated the future with optimism. She and her boyfriend, Justin, were on the brink of embarking on a shared life journey. Justin was unable to join them due to an unexpected business commitment. However, he had no objections to Adrian spending the evening in Jay's company. After all, they were not only roommates but also friends. Initially, Jay and Adrienne celebrated at home, sharing a few drinks and reminiscing about fond memories. Later, they decided to extend the night elsewhere and headed to the Diamond Doll Strip Club, an establishment that remains operational to this day and appears as it does from the outside. At 3:34 a.m., Jay dialed 911, notifying the operator that upon returning home, he discovered his roommate without signs of life. Jay explained that both he and Adrienne were initially at a nightclub, but she left earlier, and he stayed for a while longer. Upon returning home, he discovered her on the bathroom floor with her eyes open and no signs of breathing. Disturbingly, there were indications of a struggle, suggesting foul play. In response to the operator's guidance, Jay diligently performed CPR on Adrienne, following the instructions provided. Despite his efforts, when the medics arrived with the ambulance, she had already passed away. Regrettably, she was pronounced dead at the scene, leaving no opportunity for further assistance. The police faced critical questions. Who was responsible for Adrienne Roberts' tragic demise, and was her roommate implicated in any way? Their investigation commenced with a meticulous search of the residence, scrutinizing every closet and inspecting beneath every bed to ensure the perpetrator was not concealed within. Detectives and forensic experts, upon reaching the crime scene, were quick to observe the absence of signs of forced entry at the front door. Adrienne's lifeless body was discovered on the bathroom floor, clad only in a bra. The cause of her death was attributed to a stab wound to the chest, with indications of a struggle in the bathroom suggesting that Adrienne had fought to defend herself. The near nudity of Adrienne heightened the detectives' suspicion that the assailant could be male. Seeking more detailed information, they awaited insights from forensic experts who conducted the autopsy. During a thorough examination of the residence, detectives stumbled upon an intriguing discovery in Adrienne's bedroom. They noted that a portion of the sheet on her bed had been deliberately severed, prompting speculation that the perpetrator aimed to eliminate potential evidence, possibly containing the criminal's DNA. Curiously, it struck the investigators as odd that the culprit hadn't taken the entire sheet, considering the remaining part also held DNA traces. Notably, samples resembling seminal fluid were identified, leading to the decision to send them to the laboratory for further analysis. It was discovered that Adrienne's car was conspicuously absent from the adjacent parking lot, indicating the possibility of theft. The police initiated a search for potential witnesses and issued an APB for the missing vehicle. To unravel the mystery, detectives sought to piece together every detail of Adrienne's final hours. However, their first solemn duty was to inform her family of the tragic news. The revelation of Adrienne's fate came as an overwhelming shock to her parents, grappling with the disbelief that someone had taken away their cherished daughter. Justin, Adrienne's boyfriend, received news of the incident the following morning. The sight of the police cordoning off Adrienne's residence immediately signaled to him that something was amiss. The detectives delivered the heartbreaking news to Justin, revealing that Adrienne had passed away the previous night. Given the tendency of criminals to return to the crime scene and Justin's close relationship with Adrienne, investigators naturally began scrutinizing him for potential involvement, a routine practice in such cases. Several hours later that same day, Adrienne's car was located a few blocks from her residence. The headlights were on, and the keys were left in the ignition. The abandoned vehicle only reinforced the investigators' suspicion that the criminal had utilized the victim's car to flee the crime scene. Forensic experts meticulously examined the car's interior, hopeful to discover any evidence that could aid in solving the case. Turning to CCTV footage, investigators sought to identify the individual behind the wheel of Adrienne's car. Regrettably, the location where Adrienne's car was discovered lacked surveillance cameras. However, neighboring buildings had cameras, and upon reviewing the footage, investigators identified a man in shorts, sporting a baseball cap and long hair. Remarkably, this coincided with the timing of the 911 call. The man was observed strolling away from Adrienne's car, prompting a crucial need to trace his subsequent movements. Another surveillance camera around the corner could potentially provide more information, but much to the investigators' dismay, the man went in the opposite direction, eluding further tracking. Despite watching the recording repeatedly, the investigators faced disappointment, hoping to uncover details they might have initially overlooked. Yet, discerning details beyond the general features of the man proved challenging due to the nighttime recording. The investigation took a turn as interviews with witnesses yielded fresh perspectives. A neighbor, while sitting on the porch of their house at night, disclosed seeing Adrienne and a man sprinting along the sidewalk. The circumstances were perplexing for several reasons. Firstly, it was late at night, an unusual time for such activity. Secondly, their attire didn't align with typical jogging attire. Adrienne was in a dress, not sportswear, and she held shoes in her hand. The man pursuing her wasn't dressed in athletic gear either, yet the situation didn't appear to be a typical stalking scenario since Adrienne showed no signs of distress, either screaming nor calling for help. Hence, the neighbor didn't initially place significant importance on what they witnessed. As mentioned earlier, the investigators faced the task of reconstructing the timeline leading up to the 911 call about Adrienne. The focus turned to the victim's roommate, Jay, who was summoned to the police station for questioning. Given that Adrienne had gone to the club with him, and he was the one who discovered her on the bathroom floor, he became a key person of interest. During the interrogation, Jay asserted that he and Adrienne had shared a few drinks at home before heading to Diamond Dolls, their go-to spot for unwinding and escaping everyday pressures. According to Jay, they opted to walk to Diamond Dolls, considering they had already consumed alcohol and wanted to avoid driving in an impaired state. This choice led the police to concentrate their efforts on the club, given its potential association with visitors of questionable repute. Jay recounted that they arrived at the club around 10:30 p.m., spending several hours at a table. During their time there, an unfamiliar individual, described by Jay as an African American with a beard and a baseball cap, joined them. Later in the evening, Adrienne decided to head home, and Jay purportedly remained behind after her departure. Jay observed that the previously unknown individual at their table also left. In an effort to validate Jay's account and unearth new leads, the investigators proceeded to Diamond Dolls. There was confidence that the club's surveillance cameras held the key to validating Jay's account and uncovering any potential discrepancies. A camera with a broad field of view, directed towards the road, meticulously recorded everyone entering and exiting the club that evening. Upon reviewing the footage, investigators pinpointed the moment when Jay and Adrienne arrived at the club. The recording depicted them in a calm state, with no apparent signs of anything unusual occurring at that juncture. Another camera strategically positioned at the entrance to the club boasted excellent recording quality, enabling the police to discern individuals' faces and details with precision. The CCTV footage substantiated Jay's statement, as it revealed him leaving the club unaccompanied at 2:53 a.m. Exiting onto the parking lot, he proceeded to walk in the direction of his residence. The CCTV footage also corroborated that Adrienne had left the club before Jay, capturing her departure at 1:38 a.m. Keen observers might have already noted an anomaly. When Adrienne arrived at the club, she was dressed in a dress and what appeared to be a jacket. However, when she exited, she was solely wearing the dress. Adrienne had left the club and was on her way home when, 4 seconds later, a man wearing a baseball cap emerged from the establishment. He ran out after her to return the jacket she had left inside. After the man handed the jacket to Adrienne, a conversation ensued, the details of which remain forever unknown. Rather than returning to the club, this man chose to accompany Adrienne. Upon leaving the parking lot, they turned right onto a quiet, sparsely populated street. The absence of houses and the desolate nature of the surroundings raised questions about whether Adrienne felt endangered in that moment. The truth remains elusive. Upon comparing the man captured on the club's CCTV footage with the man observed beside Adrienne's abandoned car, investigators reached the conclusion that they were distinct individuals. Considering the circumstances leading up to her demise, the focus shifted to the man seen on the club's CCTV footage as the likely perpetrator, while the individual near the car could potentially be a random passerby. In any case, the police diligently explored every possible scenario to unravel the mystery and provide answers to Adrienne's grieving parents promptly. Her family journeyed to Florida to collect her belongings, where investigators convened with Mark and Dolores, assuring them of their commitment to exhaust all efforts in finding and bringing the perpetrator to justice. Adrienne's parents attested that she was a warm and amicable individual without any known adversaries. Her relationships with both her boyfriend, Justin, and roommate, Jay, were described as positive. Investigators were inclined to believe that Adrienne likely did not know the person who ended her life tragically. Soon, the laboratory report arrived, revealing that despite the criminal's attempt to eliminate evidence by cutting a portion of the sheet, forensic experts still uncovered male DNA. Furthermore, the unidentified male DNA was not only found on the sheet, but also on Adrienne's body and the walls. When cross-referenced with the DNA database, investigators were disheartened to find no matches. Armed with the DNA of an unknown man and the CCTV footage from the club, where Adrienne spent her final evening, detectives deemed the footage a crucial lead in solving the case at this stage of the investigation. They revisited the recordings, expanding their scrutiny beyond the nighttime footage to include daytime recordings. This shift in focus yielded results. Approximately 8 hours prior to Adrienne's tragic demise, investigators observed the same man engaged in conversation with her in the parking lot and departing with her. The police now possessed a clearer image of his face. In an effort to trace how this unknown man arrived at the club, investigators noticed that he had taken a taxi. The recording revealed the visible phone number printed on the taxi, allowing for the identification of the car's brand. This crucial detail facilitated the identification of the man. Detectives traced the phone number associated with the taxi order near Diamond Dolls, leading them to discover that the number belonged to Thomas Frederick. By comparing his photo on the driver's license with the individual on the CCTV footage, the detectives ascertained that it was the same person. Thomas Frederick emerged as the primary suspect in this case. The police sought incontrovertible evidence before moving to arrest Thomas Frederick. Relying solely on the recordings from the cameras wasn't deemed sufficient. Consequently, they opted to covertly observe Frederick, wary of tipping him off. The officers surveilled him for a week and a half, patiently waiting for the opportune moment. They tracked him to his workplace and observed his residence throughout the night, remaining vigilant for any chance to obtain evidence. Their patience paid off when, one day, Frederick discarded a cigarette butt onto the road. Seizing the opportunity, the officers collected the cigarette butt and forwarded it to the laboratory for DNA analysis. The crucial question loomed: was Thomas Frederick the individual who left traces in Adrienne Roberts' home? As they awaited the results of the tests, the investigation hung in suspense, continuing their covert surveillance due to the fear that Thomas Frederick might attempt to flee the state. The police anxiously awaited the crucial laboratory report. When it arrived, the experts' conclusion was not unexpected. The DNA found on the sheet, walls in the house, and Adrienne's body matched Thomas Frederick. Armed with this incriminating evidence, the police promptly arrested him and brought him in for questioning at the police station. During the interrogation, Frederick claimed that he frequently visited various clubs and bars, often making new acquaintances. When shown a picture of Adrienne Robert, he asserted that they had met at Diamond Dolls. According to Frederick, Adrien treated him to a drink, and they subsequently danced and chatted before he headed to work after leaving the club. However, Frederick's account faced a significant challenge when the CCTV footage contradicted his statements. The footage clearly depicted him leaving with Adrienne. When confronted with this inconsistency, Frederick altered his story, claiming that he and Adrienne walked together to the end of the street before parting ways in different directions. This narrative seemed convenient, especially considering the potential consequences he faced, including a possible life sentence. When questioned about whether he had ever been to Adrienne's house, Frederick asserted that he couldn't recall due to excessive drinking that night. It appeared as though Frederick was backtracking on his earlier statements, or conveniently experiencing memory lapses, particularly regarding the crucial moments when they reached the end of the street and parted ways. Despite Frederick's selective memory, claiming he couldn't recall being at Adrienne's house, investigators were skeptical, particularly given the witness account of Adrienne running barefoot with her shoes in hand, pursued by Frederick. When confronted with this information, Frederick altered his story once again, asserting that Adrienne had asked him to accompany her home. According to him, she then expressed a need to hurry, removed her shoes, and ran. Frederick claimed he had no choice but to run alongside her, maintaining that he did not pursue her but merely kept her company. The investigators, weary of his inconsistent narratives, eventually accused him of assaulting Adrienne. Upon being informed that his DNA was found on the sheet, Adrienne's body, and various items in her house, Frederick, realizing escape was unlikely, attempted to shift the narrative. He now claimed that he had acted in self-defense. Suddenly, his memory became remarkably clearer. According to Frederick, he and Adrienne had consensual intercourse after arriving at her house. Subsequently, Adrienne felt unwell, leading them to the bathroom where she vomited. Allegedly, a dispute erupted, with Adrienne brandishing a knife, threatening him, and attempting to harm him. Claiming self-defense, Frederick asserted that he exercised his right to protect himself, leading to Adrienne's tragic demise. Supposedly, in a state of panic and confusion, he opted not to summon emergency assistance by calling 911. Fearing blame for the woman's death, he fled the scene. Consequently, the police charged Thomas Frederick with first-degree homicide. In January 2014, as the trial unfolded, the prosecutor presented a version of events from that fateful night. Adrienne and Jay had shared some drinks at home before heading to Diamond Dolls, all in good spirits. There, Thomas Frederick joined them at their table, appearing to be an ordinary person engaged in casual conversation. The following day, with plans to move her belongings to her and Justin's new home, Adrienne opted to leave earlier, while Jay chose to remain at the club. Frederick seized this opportunity and followed her, despite her reluctance for his company, as she attempted to distance herself from him. However, she couldn't escape him. Frederick pursued her all the way home, and upon her entering, he forcibly entered as well. Inside, he obtained a knife from the kitchen and carried out the sinister intent he had been harboring. According to the prosecutor's account, the injuries on her body suggested that any interaction with Frederick was not consensual. Subsequently, fearing potential repercussions if Adrienne reported him to the police, he decided to end her life. In an attempt to cover his tracks, he removed a section of the sheet on which his seminal fluid remained. Nevertheless, this attempt proved futile as the police discovered the criminal's DNA in various locations, including on Adrienne's body. Frederick then took her car keys, drove a short distance, and abandoned the vehicle. Adrienne's parents chose to leave the courtroom during the medical examiner's statement, unwilling to hear the harrowing details. Mark Roberts expressed, "That doesn't bring her back, and I didn't want to know what she went through." It was evident that Adrienne fought fiercely. The loss of their daughter has posed an ongoing struggle for Mark and Dolores Roberts. Mark acknowledged, "It's definitely going to still take a while for us because we just lost the most precious thing in our lives." He added, "We'll get back on our feet because that would be something that Adrienne would want. And it's going to take a little while, But yeah, we're gonna get there. Meanwhile, Thomas Frederick's defense sought to tarnish Adrienne's reputation. During the trial, Frederick's lawyer claimed that Adrienne invited him to her home for consensual intercourse. However, this assertion lacked any credible basis and was likely an attempt by the perpetrator to rationalize his presence in the victim's house. The irrefutable fact, supported by DNA evidence pointing to only one individual, remains. Frederick's defense also attempted to persuade the jury that he acted in self-defense, arguing that he sustained a stab wound while fending off Adrienne. Despite these efforts, the jury rejected the self-defense claim. Thomas Frederick was found guilty of first-degree homicide and car theft due to a lack of evidence supporting the charge of forcing her into intimacy by threatening her with a knife. The court subsequently sentenced the 25-year-old Thomas Hampton Frederick to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Adrienne's father expressed his and his wife's relief upon hearing that Frederick would spend the rest of his life in prison, stating, "It doesn't bring Adrienne back, but justice was served today." Enduring the challenge of being in the same room as the man who harmed his daughter, he found it difficult to contain his emotions. According to him, Frederick exhibited no sympathy or remorse, even when the jury delivered its verdict, instead displaying a cocky demeanor. When the verdict was announced, Robert and Dolores wept, expressing their happiness. Reflecting on Adrienne's vibrant personality, Robert said, "She just loved to live life. Her smile was infectious. It's sad that we'll never see that again." Adrienne's family extended their gratitude to everyone who supported them during this challenging time, including the police and the prosecutor, whose efforts ensured that the criminal received a well-deserved punishment.